The Switch is a treasure trove of remakes, 2-packs, limited releases, solid first-party support, and so much more. To be honest, I didn't grow up a Nintendo kid, so all my love came later in my life. When the Switch first came out, I was a total non-believer, especially because at the time, I didn't care much for the Wii or Wii U. But after my purchase of a Pikachu system in 2019, the Switch blew me away as the library doubled and tripled in size, with games of all genres. There's truly something on it for everyone. Here are 10 Switch games that I'd recommend to anyone. Disaster Report 4, Summer Memories, is not the most graphically impressive game, nor does it always have the best performance. I won't lie, the PS4 version is better optimized, but playing this handheld helps a bit with that resolution. This was originally made on the PS3, and it's still got some of that texture oddness here and there, but it's forgivable. So what does Report 4 have? So much heart. At the start of the game, you can choose from a pretty big list of options what you, personally, would do in a natural disaster situation, and that changes little things about options you have later in the game. Plus, there's quite the connective tissue in this game. For example, meeting a stressed teacher on the street who's looking for some students. You can pass her up, but you can also help her. If you do the latter, and you find the students and tell them she's on the hunt, the stakes are much higher when they nearly come face to face with death. And speaking on the actual disaster, this game has a good eye for scale, most things towering over you appropriately. When buildings or bridges fall, the music just goes silent, and the explosions and rubble smashing into the ground has a real weight, right near your feet at times. There's a pretty real chance you can get smashed, so you get to choose between hiding or holding in place. When it comes to pricing, a physical copy costs about $25 USD, and the eShop literally runs at $50.99 until there's a deal. I hate digital pricing so much. I've mentioned my love for the Dreamcast once before, but I have quite the history with Jet Set Radio. It's got style for days, in just about every department. So when I heard about Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, it was a no-brainer that I buy it. Luckily for me, it absolutely lived up to be a nearly perfect modern take on Jet Set, specifically Future on the Xbox. Look, someone on YouTube even has a side-by-side. There's just no question what the makers of this game were trying to pull off. Okay, so I'm gonna try to get you on my hype train. The music? Slays. The colors? Slay. Costumes? All sick. The story? Decent. There's actually a character focus in this thing, which I really didn't expect. As you play the game, you can even unlock a crazy taxi to fast travel. There's just so much good. Of course, the important thing here is the gameplay, and it plays smooth like butter. You have 3 different things to ride with: a BMX bike, skates, and a board. They don't affect controls or feel, but it's really nice to visually change it up every once in a while. It's got the freedom of a Tony Hawk game when it comes to what can be tricked on, but more simple, which I think is good. When it comes to buying, it goes for $25 in box and $40 on the eShop. My tip? Hit up GameStop. It goes on sale all the time there. Happy hunting. For the longest time, I've considered Blade Runner to be my absolute favorite film of all time. I've read the book, watched the sequel, and recently got hold of Blade Runner Enhanced Edition. The story is the perfect blend of the book, the first movie, and a little bit of original spice with a new protagonist to insert yourself into the world with. This is a very story-focused point-and-click adventure, so that story is crucial. Now, there are some downsides I want to be upfront with. The first being that the upscaling they did to smooth out the pixelated backgrounds makes the interactable characters stick out like sore thumbs. The second being that the game has one of those ugly borders around it. And the third thing is that this game was made for a mouse and keyboard experience, so it does feel awkward moving a cursor around with the analog sometimes. As for the good things, well, it's a privilege to be in the world of Blade Runner again. So much outside of film is inspired by that original movie. So things in the game feel very believable to this day. Mostly because you've likely seen a lot of this stuff in other games, anime, or whatever else before. Besides that, the actual gameplay sections outside of chatting with people changes up a good amount of the time. Sometimes you're giving someone a good old replicant test, and other times you've got to scan recordings to discover clues to go off of. There's even some gun gameplay. I just wish I had a light gun again, kinda like Snatcher did. Anyhow, this is a very neat experience that's easy to follow whether you're familiar with the OG source or you're just in the mood for a good adventure game. So when it comes to buying, it's about 45 USD complete. Tracking it down is tricky, given that it's a limited run print, but Amazon does tend to have a good number of copies available. There's also a really nice collector version, but that'll run you closer to 100. Stubbs the Zombie was originally on the OG Xbox, created on the same engine, and with most of the same team, who worked on Halo. Ever since I first started watching YouTube, this had been on my list of games to find for a long time. At the time, pre-2020 price gouging, it was one of those games creeping closer to 100 USD, and that just wasn't going to work for teenage me. Luckily now, the remaster is quite faithful, plays well, and seems to always be cheap. The objective is simple. You're a zombie in a weird pseudo-1950s world, turning other people into zombies and further infecting the town as you go. It ramps up in ridiculousness very quickly, all while fantastic music covers play. If anything, give some of them a listen. While the gameplay is fine, the actual textures in-game won't blow your mind, seeing as this isn't a remake. Nonetheless, it's a game bound to bring you some entertainment. It goes for about $20 physically. Astral Train is one of those games that everyone who's played it has been absolutely obsessed with it ever since it came out. It's one of the finest hack-and-slash games on the Switch, with an awesome fighting system between you and your Legion that gets super complicated if you get far enough. It's got beautiful music, a very well-realized world, good voice acting, an awesome customization system, and a sick story, all packaged into a fairly lengthy experience. With that length, sometimes you might have to take a break, and this game actually accommodates that, giving you a tutorial room in your home base that can be accessed anytime. The RPG mechanics of choosing what you want to learn on top of the physical appearance options makes it so that the story changes each time you replay it. It's just a solid experience all the way around, and it's only on the Switch, so it's a must-have if you're into gameplay like this. It's a cheap game too, around $30 physically. The only thing I found is that it's not so easy to hunt down in the wild, so you might have to resort to online means. I have a confession to make. I did not grow up being a diehard Pokemon fan. I watched the anime, casually collected cards, and constantly saw Poke-related things in my whole life, but I did not complete a single game until getting the Pikachu Switch. And then I gave away my digital code, and bought a physical one in 2022, giving a copy of Let's Go Eevee to a friend of the channel, Amanda, who's been a voice in some older videos actually. Links to her stuff below. We've decided to go headfirst into the Pokemon world, in order, so we've started with the Let's Go games. I did in fact emulate Fire Red in early 2012, and then got gifted a copy of Pokemon Yellow version in the same year. I always got bored with the slow-moving gameplay and constant run-ins with Pokemon. Boy oh boy, do these remakes simplify and update things greatly. Let's Go Pika fixes the random encounters by having them on the map already. It also lets you skip battle scenes, save wherever, and trade very swiftly. The big hang-up people have with this version of the game is that, like the title suggests, it's playing off the style of Pokemon Go, where you have to throw a ball at Pokemon to catch them. It does feel weird at first, but if you're not playing handheld, it insists you use motion controls. But you do get used to it one way or another. I always went handheld. There's also the option to cheat the system and go docked with 2 Joy-Cons to add in a second trainer and get more Pokemon to help you through battles. It's not a very tough game though, and I'd say it encourages you to collect them over fighting, which I liked a lot. The rearranged music, the updated graphical style, the character customization all stay truthful to the OG. At least from what I know. So if you're a beginner like me, I'd recommend this one wholeheartedly. And after seeing the performance and choices in the other mainline Switch games, I'd double that recommendation. When it comes to pricing, it's first party, so it's almost always between $40 to $50, even at real sale shops. I have already brought this game up in passing, and it will undoubtedly one day be like a 40-minute video, but I cannot go without recommending Fire Emblem Three Houses. This game rocked my world, and since I first played it, I have gladly put hundreds of hours into it. The amount of content is remarkable for a $60 price tag, though it's reselling for only $30 or less. You've got 3 houses to choose from, and while the 10 to 15 hours as you start seem awfully familiar between houses, I promise you that everything is majorly different later on. In each house, there's a large array of characters specific to it, with stories that connect to each other in interesting ways, and gameplay attributes that spice things up. For the most part, they also go through interesting character arcs that leave you feeling like you actually know them, particularly with how realized the main house leaders are. They're big, dedicated fan bases for a reason. I'll personally never get over my love for Edelgard. There's even a reasonably priced DLC story that is a totally different set of maps, characters, and story to get through if you just couldn't get enough of the game already. I also love the character design, voice work, stage design, and music. God, the music is insane. This game actually inspired me on my final body of work in college, so that's a fun fact there. The dating system is also a major boon to this game's life. The shipping wars are real, because all the characters, in one way or another, can end up with either you or each other. It adds a little extra spice to the whole thing, I think. When I first saw this game, I wrote it off due to its strategy gameplay, but when you start playing it and give it a good chance, it becomes addicting and so gratifying. Battles can be really brutal, but it always feels fair, and you get better with each map. The Fire Emblem system of weapons has been similar for a long time, but this game in particular feels like a streamlined experience that bends to your will as you get familiar with what it has to offer. And when you're not in battle, it has sections where you're on foot, talking with people, collecting items for battle, teaching your students, and much more. None of that feels like a wasted time, I'd argue. I grew to love literally every aspect of Three Houses, so I seriously cannot recommend it enough. While I first played these games on the DS, and will never sell off my original copies, it's been a pleasure to recommend the remastered and streamlined Ace Attorney collection to everyone I know. Oh, and if you're in love with Phoenix like most of us are, I made a high-quality acrylic keychain of him that's on my Etsy, link below. Anyhow, this collection has given a new life to the previously dying Capcom series. The releases before this one were digital-only 3DS games that are stuck on there as of right now. But I can gleefully report that I do think they'll make their way to Switch, seeing as just a few days ago I picked up the Miles Edgeworth collection, and a few months ago I grabbed the Apollo releases. All great things. Ace Attorney is the sole reason many people even want to be lawyers. It's like the Legally Blonde effect on women, but for the boys and the queers. Ace Attorney games are visual novels that have boatloads going on in them both story and gameplay-wise. Each entry is slightly different in its gimmicks, but it all comes back to collecting intel on the streets, and then battling in the courtrooms. This collection includes Ace Attorney, Justice for All, and Trials and Tribulations. All of their stories interlink, but you don't have to play them in order on this collection if, let's say, you've already played the first one a while back. All of them feature some funky characters, crazy twisty stories, addictive music, and quality gameplay that never fails to... All of them feature some funky characters, crazy twisty stories, addictive music, and quality gameplay that never feels like it's killing your time. The downside I find in them, however, is that sometimes you really do have to find clues in the exact order the game expects to be logical, when at times I don't find it to make sense. So you might be blindly searching every once in a while. That's kind of a standard adventure game problem though. And the other problem I've got is more of a nitpick than anything, and that's my issue with the new unpixelated art. The DS games totally were products of their time, all rendered in pixelated fashion. I fondly look back on that style though, and that's totally wiped away here, looking much more glossy and sometimes sterile. It's almost like we see too much of the boring backgrounds now, instead of being left to interpret some stuff in the background art. It stuck out like a sore thumb at the beginning of my playthrough, and then didn't bug me so much later on. As for buying this, it's unfortunately digital only in the US, but it does go on sale pretty often on the eShop. But also, there are some Play Asia copies that you can play in English. Just be careful to double check your copy if that's the route you go. In the early 2000s, when superhero movies weren't a tired trope, video game tie-ins ran the life of my cousins, who religiously collected all things superheroes. Many a days did they play X-Men Legends in both Marvel Ultimate Alliance games. So in the summer of 2019, the three of us, plus one of my friends, picked up Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order, Day 1. Is it the most perfect game in the world? Not so much. But it has DLC that's actually optional and fun. Some are even free, a rarity in the licensed game market. There's also a large array of characters to pick from, and I think I pretty much always chose between Spider-Man and Ghost Rider. As a 4-player experience with online co-op, there was never lag or screen sharing going on, so it felt like the view of the game was unaltered and keeping up with our crazy screen-filling attacks. The one thing I'd recommend is that you don't go at this solo. Most enemies require you to stagger them before you actually can land real kills, and that sometimes requires you to work in tandem with your team and plan exactly when to hit. Otherwise, each fight takes way longer than it needs to. Also, on higher difficulties, this game can be a beast of a battle, so again, that teamwork makes the dream work. As for the level design, it's maybe not the hottest thing on the block, but it does the job. And the enemies you fight are interesting enough to keep you moving. Then when it comes to the story, it's also kind of whatever, not the best, not the worst. Typical Golden Age storytelling that's straightforward. When it comes to purchasing, it's around $30 or less. It's time to wrap things up, so here we are at number 10, with probably the most obvious choice of all, Mario Kart 8. It may be the perfect game on Switch, honestly. Even if you don't like kart games, there's something so beginner-friendly about 8 that, at the very least, keeps your attention on the screen for those 3 or so laps you might pretend you don't care about winning. It's good at parties, couch co-op, online co-op, even solo. There's so much to unlock, and there are so many freaking maps now, it's insane. I wish they gave us a new game instead of doing booster packs, but the quality and quantity of the new maps is impeccable. They're almost more interesting than the base game ones now, with both revamped OG stages and entirely new ones. The number of characters you can play can draw in anyone who knows even the most basic of knowledge about the Mario world, with car and bike customization that is really fun to play around with until you get the perfect setup for yourself. I already said the maps are awesome, but some of them blow me away, with secret paths in them I still uncover after multiple years of playing the game. I used to play kart between rounds of Street Fighter Alpha with 2 of my closest friends for like a year straight during college. I regret nothing. It definitely feels like a cozy game at this point. So I'll always be thankful for that in particular. If you are interested in buying it, it is a first-party game, so it's kind of big monies at places like Target. But you can find used copies for $35 or so. And that's the 10 I've got for now. Hopefully something in there is for you. It's likely I'll do a round of more obscure recommendations one day soon, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you very much for watching.